Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about something that I think a lot of you are going to be able to relate to.
Okay.
It's this idea that bigger is always better, and we're kind of going to be pushing back on that today. We're looking
Yeah,
at the book Company of One by Paul Jarvis,
that's right.
and really kind of digging into this idea that maybe staying small can be more fulfilling, can be more profitable.
It's definitely counterintuitive.
It is.
Um, the common wisdom is always you got to scale up, you got to grow, grow, grow.
Exactly. And so Jarvis really breaks down a lot of the pressures that I think people feel,
Yeah.
both internally and externally,
Mhm.
that kind of push us in that direction, even if it doesn't feel good.
Right.
And so he talks about these four horsemen of the growth apocalypse, like these forces that are kind of driving us towards this relentless expansion.
Yeah, the doom and gloom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So let's start unpacking those.
Okay.
What's the first horseman that Jarvis identifies?
The first one he talks about is inflation, and I think we can all relate to that these days.
Yeah, rising costs are a huge challenge.
Absolutely. And when you think about it, those rising costs can really hit larger companies harder
Ah, interesting.
because they've got more overhead,
More employees.
more layers of bureaucracy.
So they have to raise prices just to kind of stay afloat.
Exactly. It's this constant struggle to keep up. And I think Jarvis makes a really interesting point that smaller businesses,
Yeah.
especially those with low overhead, they can be a lot more agile in a volatile economy.
They can kind of weather those storms a little bit better.
That's right. They can adjust their pricing, they can adapt more quickly, and they don't have to worry about, pleasing a board of investors or a bunch of shareholders.
Right. They have more control over their destiny.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads us into the second horseman,
Okay, bring on horseman number 2.
investor pressure.
Oh, yeah.
This is a big one, especially in the startup world.
It's that classic growth at all costs mentality.
Exactly. And Jarvis argues that taking on venture capital often comes with this demand for rapid growth.
Which is not always sustainable.
Right. Sometimes it feels like you're on this treadmill just running and running and running, but not really getting anywhere.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, are these companies actually building something that's going to last? Or are they just chasing the next funding round?
That's a great question. And, Jarvis is really advocating for a more independent approach. He believes that entrepreneurs should have the freedom to build businesses on their own terms.
So they're not beholden to investors who might have different priorities.
Exactly. It's about maintaining control and staying true to your vision.
Yeah, not letting those external pressures dictate your path.
Right. It's about defining success on your own terms. And sometimes that might look very different from the traditional unicorn narrative.
Okay, so we've got inflation and investor pressure. What's the third pressure point that Jarvis talks about?
The third one is customer churn.
Customer churn.
Sure.
Okay, so losing customers.
Yeah, and we all know that acquiring new customers is expensive, but Jarvis really emphasizes the hidden cost of constantly chasing after those new clients.
Oh,
He argues that it can actually distract you from building deeper relationships with your existing customers.
that makes sense.
It's like you're always focused on the next big thing instead of nurturing the connections you already have.
Yeah, it's like you're on this hamster wheel,
Exactly.
constantly having to bring in new people.
And it can be exhausting.
It can.
And it's not always sustainable.
So what's the alternative?
Jarvis suggests focusing on a smaller, more dedicated customer base.
Okay.
It's about building genuine relationships, providing exceptional value, and creating a sense of community around your brand.
So instead of constantly chasing new leads,
Yeah,
you're investing in the relationships that you already have.
absolutely. And think about the impact on your workload and stress levels.
Right.
Constantly chasing new leads can be exhausting,
It's like you never get to actually enjoy the fruits of your labor.
right? You're always on to the next thing.
Okay, so we've talked about 3 horsemen so far. Inflation, investor pressure, and customer churn. What's the fourth and final horseman that Jarvis identifies?
This one might surprise you.
Okay, lay it on me.
It's ambition.
Ambition.
Yeah, that internal drive to build something big, to leave your mark on the world.
Okay.
And there's nothing inherently wrong with ambition,
Of course not.
but Jarvis cautions us to examine our motivations.
He's saying make sure that your ambitions are actually aligned with your values.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He wants us to consider whether our ambition is truly aligned with our vision for a fulfilling life.
So bigger isn't always better.
Right.
It's about finding that balance.
He uses this great example of an interior designer named Miranda Hickson.
Okay.
She walked away from a high-pressure corporate job
Wow.
to start her own boutique firm, but instead of trying to build a huge agency, she chose to stay small.
So she prioritized freedom and flexibility
That's right.
over those kind of traditional markers of success, like having a big team or a fancy office.
And you know what? The results speak for themselves.
Okay.
Miranda found greater fulfillment and ended up making more money while working less.
Wow, that's incredible.
It's a powerful example of how staying small can actually lead to a richer, more satisfying life.
Yeah. It's a reminder that we need to define success on our own terms.
Absolutely.
So we've unpacked these four horsemen, these forces that often push us towards endless growth. But Jarvis doesn't stop at critiquing the status quo, does he?
No, he doesn't. He actually provides a blueprint for building a successful company of one. And that's what we're going to dive into
I
next.
can't wait. Let's do it. So we've established that maybe bigger isn't always better, but what's the alternative?
Right. Where do we go from here?
How do we actually build a successful company of one?
Well, Jarvis gives us a roadmap. He breaks it down into 3 key areas: product planning and brand values.
Okay, so let's dive into those.
Sounds good.
Let's start with product.
Hmm.
What's Jarvis's take on creating something that's both viable and fulfilling?
One of his core principles is this idea of launching quickly with what he calls a minimum viable product, or MVP.
Ah, the MVP. So instead of waiting years to perfect your product or service,
Right.
you just get something out there as soon as possible.
Exactly. You want to start getting feedback and iterating based on what you learn.
So don't let perfectionism hold you back.
Perfectionism can be a real killer for entrepreneurs.
Oh yeah, I think we've all been there.
You know, you can get so caught up in the details that you never actually launch anything.
Right, it's like analysis paralysis.
Exactly. Jarvis argues that it's much better to launch something that's good enough and then improve it based on real-world feedback.
So get it out there, test it, tweak it. I like it. What kind of examples does he use to illustrate this?
He tells this great story about a writer named Alexandra Franzen.
Okay.
When she left her corporate job to go freelance, she didn't waste time building a fancy website or printing business cards.
She just went for it.
She literally just emailed about 60 people in her network and said, "Hey, I'm available for writing projects. Here's what I can do."
No bells and whistles, just straight to the point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know what? Within weeks, she had landed her first clients.
Wow. So it really can be that simple.
Sometimes the most effective approach is the most straightforward one.
I love that story. Okay, so that's product launch, fast, and iterate.
That's right.
Now let's move on to planning.
Okay.
This is where things get really interesting.
I agree.
Because we know Jarvis isn't a fan of that growth at all costs mentality.
Yeah.
So how does he approach planning?
He suggests flipping the question we usually ask ourselves.
Okay, how's...
Instead of asking, how big can I get?
Yeah.
We should be asking, how big do I need to be?
Ah, that's a good one.
It's about aligning your business growth with your personal goals and your vision for a balanced life.
So you're not just chasing some arbitrary metric.
Right. It's about defining success on your own terms.
So are there any examples of people who've done this successfully?
Absolutely. Jarvis uses the example of a cartoonist named Tom Fishburne,
Yeah.
who left a high-paying executive job to pursue his passion full-time.
Wow, big change.
It was. And within a few years, he was making more money from his cartoons than he ever did in his corporate gig.
That's amazing. But I bet he felt pressure to scale up, right? Like hire a team, take on investors.
You would think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But here's the twist. He chose to stay a company of one.
He knew what he wanted, and he stuck to his guns.
He realized that hiring employees or taking on investors would compromise his creative control and his freedom.
And he was happy with the level of success he had achieved.
Exactly. He saw no need to chase after more.
It's a powerful reminder that growth is only valuable if it serves your larger goals.
Couldn't agree more.
All right, so we've covered product and planning. Let's move on to the final element of Jarvis's company of one framework.
Okay.
Brand values. Why are they so important in this model?
Well, think about it. In a crowded marketplace, it's more important than ever to stand out.
To differentiate yourself.
Right. And Jarvis argues that customers are drawn to authenticity. They want to connect with brands that have a purpose beyond just making a profit.
So it's not just about what you sell.
Right.
It's about what you believe in.
Exactly.
It's about how you show up in the world.
It's about having a story that resonates with people.
Are there any examples of companies that have done this really well?
Absolutely. Jarvis uses a really fascinating example. You familiar with Patagonia's Don't Buy This Jacket campaign?
Are you talking about the campaign where they actually discourage people from buying their products?
Yep, that's the one. They ran a full-page ad in the New York Times encouraging people to repair their old clothes instead of buying new ones.
Even though it meant potentially losing sales.
Exactly. They were willing to sacrifice short-term profits to stay true to their values.
That's a bold move.
It was, and you know what? It actually had the opposite effect.
Really?
Customers were so impressed by their authenticity and their commitment to their mission that they became even more loyal to the brand.
Wow. So sometimes taking a stand can actually be good for business.
Absolutely. It's about building a brand that resonates with people on a deeper level.
It's about creating a connection that goes beyond just a transactional exchange.
That's it, exactly.
Okay, so we've got product planning and brand values as the three pillars of Jarvis's company of one approach. How do these all come together to create a business that's both fulfilling and successful?
Well, Jarvis's central argument is that a company of one isn't just a business model,
Oh,
it's a lifestyle.
ah,
It's about designing a work life that aligns with your values, your passions, and your aspirations.
it's about having the freedom and flexibility to create something you're truly proud of.
That's it. It's about feeling a sense of purpose in your work.
Now, that's a pretty compelling vision.
It
As
is.
a challenge to the status quo and an invitation to rethink what success really means.
Absolutely.
So we've covered a lot of ground today, but as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I think the most important question is this: what does a company of one look like for you listening right now?
That's a great question. Jarvis gives us the tools and the inspiration, but ultimately it's up to each of us to define what success looks like on our own terms.
What a great way to put it. It's about taking ownership of our vision and building something that truly reflects who we are and what we want to create in the world. But Jarvis doesn't stop there. He also talks about the importance of the right mindset for building a company of one.
He does, and that's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've explored Jarvis's concept of a company of one, the key ingredients for building one, but I'm curious about this idea of a mindset shift. What does he say about that?
Well, it's like you can have all the right tools and strategies, but if you're not in the right headspace,
Right.
it's not going to work.
You need to rewire your thinking.
Exactly.
So what are some of the mindset shifts that Jarvis talks about?
One of the biggest ones is redefining success.
Hmm.
It's not about chasing external validation or comparing yourself to others.
Right.
It's about setting your own goals and measuring progress on your own terms.
So instead of focusing on money or fame, you're finding fulfillment in the work itself.
Right. It's about creating a life that feels meaningful and purposeful, not just profitable.
I love that. So what's another key mindset shift?
Jarvis talks a lot about embracing simplicity.
Embracing simplicity.
Yeah.
Okay, what does that look like in practice?
It's about streamlining your operations, focusing on what truly matters, and letting go of the rest.
Okay.
It's about saying no to opportunities that don't align with your vision, even if they seem lucrative on the surface.
So being really intentional with your time and energy,
Right.
making sure you're not spreading yourself too thin.
Quality over quantity.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Okay, so we've got redefining success and embracing simplicity. What's the final mindset shift we need to talk about?
This one might be the most challenging for some people. It's about embracing imperfection.
Embracing imperfection. That's interesting. What does Jarvis mean by that?
He encourages us to let go of the need for everything to be perfect.
I think we're all guilty of that sometimes.
He has this great saying, done is better than perfect.
Oh, I love that. It's so true. We can get so caught up in trying to make things perfect that we never actually ship anything.
Exactly. And sometimes good enough is good enough.
So it's about taking action, even if you're not 100% ready,
Right.
even if you're afraid of making mistakes.
It's about embracing that iterative process, learning and growing as you go.
Being open to feedback.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm taking away from all of this? Is that building a company of one isn't just about building a business, it's about building a life.
That's a great way to put it.
It's about aligning your work with your values and creating something that feels truly authentic and fulfilling.
It's a philosophy of life.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Company of One, I want to leave you listening with a final thought. Jarvis argues that a company of one isn't just a business model. It's a way of being in the world.
I like that.
It's about conscious growth. It's
Yeah.
about choosing what you want to cultivate and nurture and what you want to let go of.
It's about finding that sweet spot where your work feels like an expression of who you are, not just a way to make a living.
That's a perfect note to end on. So until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep building a life that truly lights you up.